So we want to talk about RRM, radio resource management, and not so much about the blatant, does it suck, does it not work? I mean, this is kind of one of those things that there's reasons for both of it, right? When you're looking at the discussions, there's reasons to automate. Andrew, you said it. Automate all things. Automate the world. Change everything. We've heard from plenty of vendors about the benefits of having some dynamicness to the environment, so being able to adapt to channel widths, things like that. So really, what does it come down to from RRM? Is it I want to make things simple and never ever have to touch this ever again and just set it and forget it? Or is there the true debate about, if we use RRM, I have to babysit RRM because I can never know what it's doing. I can't be assured of what it's doing. So Sam, you wanted to start things off. What is the take on it? Do we have to babysit this? Do we have to babysit it either which way, and we're just changing one horror for another horror? What do you think?
Well, so it's obviously a multifaceted conversation, I would say, and I think that insight into what RRM is doing is sort of step number one. Right? You can't tell if RRM is helping or hurting you if you don't understand what it's doing. And I think that dovetails nicely with do I have to watch it all day long? And the answer is no. What you should be able to do is, just like any other thing that's in your network, whether it's OSPF or spanning tree or disk storage, you set up alerts. You have NMS platforms, and if you're concerned about anything in your infrastructure, you should set up an alert that says, hey, when this goes out of whack or when this starts doing something, tell me. Just like everything else in your life, or in your networking life, right?
So you want to know what
Yeah. My wife has an alert for it. No. The point is that if you leave anything run unchecked, it's probably going to run amok in your network, and it's probably going to do something bad. So A, it obviously needs to be tuned. You need to tell it what to do. Well, A is not everybody does it well. B, when they do it well, you have to tell it what to do well. And C, you have to set up some sort of a feedback loop. It's just like doing RF design. It's an iterative process. You need to have that feedback into, have I made a change that works well or doesn't work well? And no, you shouldn't need to babysit it, but good Lord, we all check our emails all day long. We all get alerts when our EMC storage is out of disk space, or SAN. Why does RRM have to be treated anything different? The answer is it doesn't. And if you are treating it differently, then shame on you.
Well, I think it's the shame on you that's the issue. From my role in being a consultant, I've seen RRM fail over and over and over again. I don't think it's because RRM's failed. I think it's because they didn't do what you said. They didn't design it right, they didn't configure it right, and they didn't have any feedback to let them know what's happening. So by the time they call me the network's broken, I can fix it by fixing RRM. They could have done it earlier, they just didn't. So I don't think the discussion should be about, is it broken, does it work, does it not work? It's, if you do it right, it's a tool that you can use like any other tool.
I think, Keith, this morning we were having a conversation in the car, and we were talking about channel widths, and how right out of the box some things come, on by default. I think that, to your point, I think that could be part of the problem. Not that it's on by default, but that when people enable it and they just assume that it's magically going to make their network work all the time, and they're not going to have to touch it.
There were some marketing people who told them
it's an issue.
There are people who said, my sales guy said, all I have to do is turn this on and it's going to work.
Yeah, and that, I think that becomes an issue. I've seen it work unchecked, depending on the deployment, and I've seen it not work at all, where I've had to go in and manually select things and set it up. But I really do agree that, to Sam's point, that it really, anything that you leave alone, whether it's software updates on, in your controllers or on your access points or whatever, all the way through
your workstations.
Yeah, if you're not watching your network, something's going to break.
I'd like to chime in as well. I think there's, another decision factor that, plays in here, as certain environments RRM might be preferred over static, and then certain environments static might be preferred over RRM. And I come down to a decision on the risk. What's my risk of statics having interferers? And what's my risk of RRM creating CCI? And based on the environment I'm in, I might make a different decision.
Tempered with total cost of ownership.
Yeah. Which totally fits into what you're saying. Use it, it's just a tool.
Yeah,
use it right and appropriately in the right situation, and it could be a great thing.
Let me challenge then real quick. What's an environment that you see it as a good fit?
RRM?
Yeah, just to leave it running, just turn that thing on and let it do what it's supposed to do.
Just I never turn it on right out of the box. I always, know what it's doing, like Sam said, and try to configure it appropriately.
Well, I mean,
Well, if it's-
where do
if
you
it's-
see as a good scenario? Is a baseball field a good scenario? Is a school a good scenario?
I think anywhere where I have a large amount of external interferers that I'm concerned about, potentially, popping up and changing channels and impacting different parts of my network, I would be very concerned about.
Are you talking about interfere like a DFS radar hitting?
No,
or a
let's say a
having
neighbor
really-
wireless network, because that's going to be the most prevalent.
RV,
So let's say
RV parks, man. Yeah,
let's say I'm in Manhattan.
Disable it.
Let's say I'm in Manhattan and I've got, just all sorts of interference coming around that I can't control. That may be one area where I definitely want dynamic channels to be able to say I had an interferer pop up on channel 1 and I'm on channel 1. It'd be much better for me to relay out my channel plan to avoid that right now because I have a large amount of external neighboring interference.
That's why I'm asking, because in a real world scenario, I had it enabled on one of my RV parks that we set out, and I mean these are areas. Just imagine, it's a park with 400 units, 400 RV spaces surrounded by a city, and I thought, okay, it would probably be best to let it manage itself. Let's watch it. Let's see what the network does, how the network grows and breathes. And what we found out was that it was absolutely terrible because of the amount of interference and because of the amount of other devices that were out there. It wasted it. I had to go in there and set up everything statically just to make sure that it would even work at a baseline level, and then start to manually go back and manage any interference that would come up.
And that comes back to what vendor as well and how well they work.
Yeah,
So
not all are.
And I've seen that, but hold on, I've seen that across multiple vendors. To be fair, where it's been the exact same scenario in there, where two completely different vendors had the same issue just because of the amount of interference that were taking place in there. And that's why I ask, when is a good opportunity
So
to leave
the
it
other
in
piece
there?
is it does vary by vendor, but also it varies by how well you understand how your vendor's algorithm works.
Exactly,
So Sam, if I said I have a network and it during the peak times of the day it changes channels very frequently, you could probably tell me which option to go in and turn off on the on DCA to say stop doing
that.
And so much of the behavior, the things that we don't think work, are a direct result of either our lack of understanding of how it works or not configuring it to really do what we want.
It's the easy button problem.
It's the easy button. Yeah, it is. It's like, oh, it just takes care of it. No, it doesn't. You have to tell it exactly what to do. And I always liken it back to spanning tree. You get out on the forums of the uneducated, and people are like, oh, just turn it off. And no, you don't really want to turn it off. But they don't understand how it works. And because they don't understand how it works, it does things they don't expect. And because it does things they don't expect, their reaction is to turn it off.
And it's fair to say that not all the vendors, but the majority of vendors, those knobs and switches aren't in the same place on all of them. They do a couple of different things here and there.
They all have their own unique sets of knobs.
And they should.
And how they work, and that's differentiation between the vendors. And I know a vendor really well, and I'm starting to learn another vendor in terms of how those knobs work. And sometimes it's understanding that. And the other pieces I see is it's a very much a design constraint, right? So you don't just say, in Lee, hallway designs, they teach RRM to do very bad things. And left unchecked without some constraint, that design doesn't work for an RRM deployment. And so not only do you have to understand it, you have to help design along those paths to make it work.
So is some of this a problem that is being brought on from the marketing and the education that vendors are putting out there, and from everything that we have just had to deal with because of...
Did you just use the word marketing and education?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Because of consumerization of IT, where we had so much of the wireless technology is driven by what we do in our homes, we always constantly hear that statement that, well, I made Apple TVs work in my house, why can't you make it in the corporate environment? And I think, Lee, you've probably seen a lot of this in your environments with people that do things in their homes, then students, faculties, everybody else brings them into your environment that you take care of and you nurture and you try to ensure it works, and then it throws a fork into it. I mean, is there anything that you can add into
Well, you try to ensure it works without having to shape the network in unholy ways.
Right.
Or do real good education on why it can't work, but in all cases offer an alternative to whatever the thing is. I mean, being the party of no sucks. But every now and then you have to be for the greater good of the network, especially if you have to do something very strange for one particular client or type of client that's just going to wreak havoc and you can see it coming, or it's going to be unsupportable. The help desk might have to react in the beginning of in our class, a class starts up and something falls apart. And how do you scramble a reaction team to make it so the professor can do what he needs to do? If you're walking on those kinds of eggshells, I would just say no. But let's work together to figure out what you're trying to do and come up with something that isn't going to carry all that baggage. So, I mean, you're getting into the whole, one of my hot buttons, just the disparity of the, client market right now and all the wacky ways these things come built in, features they support and don't support, which is way beyond RRM. I realize that, but, you're...
But it is an important part about it nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think, Sam, you wanted to interject something.
Yeah, the sensationalist claims of RM will always be suboptimal is flat out irresponsible. Having said that, it has made us all start talking about a very, very big problem in a very, very vocal way. And if that leads us to better engagement with the infrastructure vendors and a deeper understanding about how that technology works, then it's absolutely worthwhile. It's just, I wish there was a different way for us to get to a point where we're all just sitting in a room arguing about RM. The reality is the vendors need to be more open about how their RM algorithms work.
And let's not forget that to this debate, there is a very large human element of what are you comfortable with? What type of designs have you made work in your experience? And are you comfortable with, just from I am confident that I can make this work. If I'm not as familiar with RRM and how the intricacies of a certain vendor's algorithm works, I have probably a much lower likelihood of making a solution work. And so if my comfort level is with static going into those environments, by all means, go in and do static. If that's the way for you and your deployments, you can get the best design possible for you being the architect or engineer, go for it. So I think there's a huge human element here, and it's just not black and white.
No, it totally isn't, because you and I could walk into the exact same customer's environment, and you could say my comfort level is I'm going to do static. My comfort level, I could say, is I'm going to tune RRM because I've not seen, you haven't read it, but I'm just using scenarios. I've read the white paper. I try to, I think I have a good understanding of how it works, for example. So I'm going to have a higher comfort level with RRM, and then we could certainly be flip-flopped in the next environment. It's just, it's
And the
all
results
about the education.
don't necessarily mean they'll be right or wrong. They're both, as long as they're meeting the customer's requirements and the clients are getting on, and the retry rates are low, and the data rates are high, and the MCSs are good. As long as you're measuring it and having the feedback loop, I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. It's, can you provide to the client devices what they need and provide the most efficient network possible?
Well, and engineers like to fall into the trap of things are black and white and there's always one way to do things, and there's never only one way to do things. There's always multiple ways that will work.
Well, there might be only one way you do things, or someone else might do things.
Yeah.
Well, there is, I would say the wrong answer is not to do anything, right? So I think that is probably the biggest problem with that people see with something like RRM, right? It's not a standard. It's not part of the 802.11 spec. So there's nothing to look at other than what the vendor tells you. Some vendors are better than others. Some are not good at all. Some of them hide and hold everything close to the best. So it's one of those things where it's like I can't. There's nothing I can look at to give me that baseline to feel comfortable with. And I think that's where people get hung up on, because the people who don't spend the time to learn how the RRM works, the majority of customers, they go by the marketing data sheet that they download from the website that talks about how awesome our auto RF feature is, and that it fills in the holes when an AP fails and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, I don't know. We always complain, right, on Twitter and everything about how, a manufacturer, their new 802.11 AC AP comes out, they talk about all these amazing speeds, and it comes out of the box at 80 megahertz, and we're like, why are you doing that? You know? And so a lot of the problem I put right at the feet of the manufacturers, because they're selling their stuff like magic, and their customers are taking it taking them at their
But
word.
wasn't it great that today Jim said they're shipping
megahertz.
at 20 megahertz?
That was
Yes,
awesome.
thank you, Jim.
So that made me so hopeful because I'm like, wow, maybe the vendors, the manufacturers are finally starting to listen to people like us. But to the point of RRM, the thing with RRM is the onus is always on the person that's putting it in, right? And a lot of people are just higher ed guys, let's say, who haven't taken the time to learn and understand Wi-Fi. They don't know to tune it.
And you know,
right? And that's the biggest problem is how do you get around it?
And what's interesting is you know, we all have our opinions on it and how it works and whatnot, but it's just getting, you know, it's snowballing into something more and more. I mean, look at what we talked about today with Cisco, where now you've got radios that are switching modes, you know, and how long before software-defined radios come in and your radio
AX is completely going to rewrite.
You know, the whole RM is not just what we know of it today or what we knew of it yesterday. It's the way that the entire network will be functioning in the short future. And I think that it's important to understand that, you know, I really like what you're saying about it's up to us to sit down with these manufacturers and tell them, hey, this is what we need and this is how we need it and why we need it, so that they work that in, because they're just going to keep loading it on and loading it on and loading it on. And, you know, Andrew said something earlier today, I don't remember specifically what it was, but it was basically along the lines of, you know, there's a lot of technicality that's being moved away from deploying these networks. You know, where people think that they can just go get that access point and plug it in, and you're the IT guy, just go buy 10 of them and make it work. And, you know, our sales guys say you just click a button and everything comes and works out of the box. It's getting to the point where all of it is becoming this automated process. So I really think it is up to us to understand that network and the intricacies of it.
A quick comment, it makes me wonder sometimes if, like Cisco and Aruba, you've got their, you know, the market leaders that are just getting, I don't even mean it negatively, more analytically, hyper complicated, more and more and more and more features. Wouldn't it be nice, just daydreaming, if you could say, I'd like the same APs without all of that stuff. I'd like basic client access, and I don't want to pay for all of the features I'm never going to use, but I still want those APs because they're kick-ass radios, but it just doesn't work that way. There isn't different code in the controllers for less features.
You can
No,
opt
because
out, but you can't opt
no, because
out.
then
Exactly.
then the complaint would be, oh, too many licensing. I got to license features in my hardware.
I don't
Then gotta
disagree.
resources.
I don't
Right? It's a
disagree, but
double-edged
I'm
sword.
saying, though, you still end up paying for a lot of things you may never use or really want. And it is what it is, you know what I mean? And it's not going to change, but it's fun to think about, boy, wouldn't it be nice if I looked at PI and saw 2/3 less of all of this?
Let the marketing team license the analytics and let this team license that side of it. Let them,
There you go.
So I think, you know, RM has been a hot topic for a lot of people lately. I mean, we've seen a lot of discussions, a lot of very opinionated statements being made, which nothing wrong with it. I think we've kind of said it a few times here in different ways, and I wish we had a little bit more time. Keith has stepped out there, but one of the things I think that is important for all of us, education. We are the advisors. There's a reason why we're sitting at the table here. There's a reason why we're in the industry, is because we are passionate about this. There's certainly no reason why we should not be writing blogs, be writing papers about our opinions on the matter, using some facts, hopefully too, in there as well.
And our experience.
Yeah, and our experience, and taking everybody's experience into consideration. I certainly will not argue that RM is the only way to go if I'm sitting down having a conversation with any of you guys at the table here, because I value everybody's opinions. And I think part of this, what we need to do to fix the RM problem, Keith, you laughed when I said marketing and education in the same sentence. Maybe that's on us to try to come up with solutions to help them be educated, use our connections into our vendors, and provide feedback on their messaging to fix the messaging.
Well, and just again, kudos to Jim Florek today. Not only writing the document, he also mentioned the new one coming out with the new features of the dual 5 gig radios, that's included in the new RM algorithm, and he will have the documentation in 2 days.
Yeah.
soon as he releases it internally, he'll release it externally. If we can get that kind of exposure and public announcement from all other vendors, I think it can do nothing but help.
Well, and so how do we, sitting at this table, let's just go down the list. Who's the market leader? Cisco, they're certainly demonstrating some leadership in that. Who's the next biggest? Aruba. How do we go pick on Aruba and say, we need information from you? And then once Aruba does, who's next in the list? And who's next in the list? I mean, collectively as an industry, we all need to be beating up on the people who aren't doing, or who aren't giving us the information to do our jobs.
Exactly.
I completely agree, but I think it's tricky because you're asking them to document and publish.
Yes, I am.
Their secret sauce.
You bet.
And I
And it
agree
starts
with
with
you
the big
completely,
one.
But Cisco's
It's-
already pulled it out and said, here.
Here you
They
go.
have. They are a fantastic example for the industry so far. And I really hope everyone else kind of falls in line with it.
Well,
That-
Aruba's documented a bunch with their VRDs, so they're not hiding. We just need to get
they're not.
a
It's
specific
just-
one here.
We need a bit more information. Yeah.
So I'm glad that I was able to drop that firecracker right at the last minute there. And we will end on that note that education is important and everybody needs education. So, David?
Excellent.